The man in the ostrich boots, Ted Cruz. Let's play hardball. Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington. Let me start tonight with Ted Cruz. He reminds me of a pair, actually, of movie characters. One is the cowboy, played by Slim Pickens, who rides the first bomb in the nuclear war in Dr. Strangelove. The second character the senator in the ostrich boots reminds me of is frightening in a different way. Perhaps in this case, it's a matter of downright ignorance. Ted Cruz brags incessantly about the schools he attended, Princeton, Harvard Law, yet I think there's a gap in his education. He seems not to know the history of demagogues. They tend to be explosive histories, but short ones. I think of Huey Long, who once predicted that when fascism comes to America, it will be called anti-fascism. But most of all, I think of Joe McCarthy. Ted Cruz reminds me of this guy, the sneer or smirk or whatever you call that thing, that insolent look of moral condescension, of contempt for all around him, the obvious hostility toward those whose attention he is so desperate to attract. He gets it all right. People pay attention when you strut around with a band of explosives strapped to your chest. The demagogue's mistake is in thinking they're looking at you, not the dynamite. The only question is who or what has the nerve, the person or the party, to put this Princeton cowboy in his place. Wouldn't it be great if it were a real patriot, a guy like John McCain? U.S. Congressman Jim Moran's a Virginia Democrat, and John Feary is a Republican strategist. Mr. Moran, I haven't seen anybody like this since the movies of the old Edward R. Murrow days of Joe McCarthy. He looks like the guy, he acts like the guy, he sneers like the guy, and he seems to have the same contempt for American institutions like deadlines, debts, anything like paying for the government or respecting your colleagues. Your thoughts?
He's a demagogue, Chris, and like a lot of demagogues, he's also a phony. You know, he purports to be representing the lower middle class workforce, and yet here's a guy that when he was studying at Harvard, he'd only study with the graduates at Harvard Law, with the graduates from Harvard, Yale, or Princeton, not the minor Ivies like Penn or Brown or Dartmouth. This guy is an arrogant elitist who's doing his best to manipulate a large swath of the country who doesn't know any better. I think they're going to get on to him pretty fast and realize what a phony he is, and the fact that he's leading them in a direction that's so contrary to their own best interests.
You know, John, I'm trying to figure out where this is taking him. I mean, everybody's entitled to free speech in this country. If you get elected to office, it's a great job being senator from Texas or United States Senate. It's an enormously impressive job. He's using it a certain way. I'm just trying to figure out, he's not a legislator. He's not trying to pass bills. He's not trying to really change government the way it's formulated and carried out. What is he actually trying to do? Can you figure it?
Well, I think he's trying to disrupt the political system, and he's pretty clever about it. I think he's been able to use a lot of different techniques, use social media, really disrupt this and attack other Republicans. Republicans are not necessarily popular with their base. He's very clever in drawing attention to himself. I think he's got some elements of demagoguery, but he has also stumbled onto the fact that Obamacare is extraordinarily unpopular. But in many ways, he's Don Quixote because he knows that he can't successfully get President Obama to repeal his own law. So he's almost tilting after windmills, but he does it on purpose because I think he wants people to understand that he has a plan to ultimately become a leader of a faction and then use that leadership to end a very unpopular program with the Republican base. I think he's very disruptive and in many ways very clever, but I can understand from your perspective why you don't like him very much.
Well, I can imagine him as Don Quixote because he would be fighting for the love of Dulcinea, but not for a government shutdown. What kind of a dream is that? What kind of a hope is that? Mr. Moran, your thoughts?
Oh, Chris, that bothers me so much. Don Quixote is my hero. At least he was genuine. He was an idealist. This guy is not genuine, and he's not an idealist. Gosh, John, we're such good friends, but I'm really disappointed that you'd use Cervantes' Don Quixote as an example of
Congressman,
Cruz is doing.
I didn't mean to offend you, but I do think that in many ways he's picking fights that he knows he can't win, and he's doing it for strategic reasons. And I think the reason is because you want to be able to point to something, and you want to make enemies out of people that are unpopular. So I think he's been pretty clever.
Running for president.
Let's go back to where I'm at on this guy.
Right.
I watched this guy's debut, and I know first impressions don't tell you everything, but they tell you a hell of a lot. I watched him in the hearings for Chuck Hagel, who's a moderate Republican, a patriot who's fought for his country, unlike a lot of us. He went out there and fought in Vietnam. For real, just like John McCain did. For real, not chicken hawks here. Real soldiers who fought for the country and suffered for it. And he accused him in his Joe McCarthy fashion of taking money from the North Koreans. He then said he probably took the money or could have taken the money from the Saudis. All this loose talk that even Lindsey Graham, who is a gentleman, came out and said, out of bounds. That's why I call him McCarthy, not just because he looks like the guy, he acts like him. That's my problem with this guy. He has contempt for the American political system. He is not a member of any political party that I can tell. He got elected to the Senate, fair enough, but his behavior has been totally and utterly destructive.
Boy, when we get to the debt ceiling, Chris, and then we have to keep the government funded again, say November 15th, I think Ted Cruz is going to play another important role because he's going to keep hammering away at the credibility of people who really want this government to function for the betterment of everyone.